Welcome to this week's episode of Tell Me More. We're actually live in the studio with video recording, and so this is going to be where you watch our videos, and as well as online and where you find our podcast. So we have a fun conversation today for the camera, for the microphone, about John 21. We're finishing up Missions Month. It's just Dr. Wiles and I, and we deep dive into just the beauty of the book of John and the beauty of Jesus and how we can share him with our world. So enjoy the listen, and we're glad you're here. Welcome to this episode of Tell Me More. I have two mediums in which I'm trying to appeal. One, for those listening online, we are actually video recording today.
Watch it. We are.
And for those video recording, this is brand new. And so now we're all caught up to what context you're sitting in. And so, and sadly, our friend Luke Stair is not here today.
Not with us today.
But it's because he has a sick kid. That's and we wish that he was. And so there's two mics.
I think he was also nervous about being on camera.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm thinking.
Camera shy. He hasn't done it much.
I think that's
so,
right.
You know,
so it's okay. It's all right. It's okay to be nervous, Luke. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, but just,
we'll ease you in.
Yeah, just you can be a novice. We'll help you. So anyway, we're finishing up Missions Month, and we decided that we get occasionally people that say, you show the Tell Me More graphic at church, and they say, we don't know where to find that. We don't listen to podcasts. And so I think it was Luke's idea, maybe Kyle's, to get Addison, who's behind the camera, involved, and to
way to go, Addison.
Make a video of the same thing. So this is how we record Tell Me More. Here's our little fun station. It's a Class A server biased preamp.
That's right.
It's how we record it. But it also has fun buttons.
It does.
And so for those, this will translate. And so let's see. Ladies and gentlemen, tell me more. I actually can't hear it in here, so we don't know. I have no idea. No clue. But that's how all that works. So, okay, now you're oriented. Now we're all oriented.
We are.
So welcome.
Look at us.
I just think perhaps someone is listening for the first time because it's now video.
Right.
So
welcome.
This is your pastor, Dr. Dennis R. Wiles. He's relatively new here, so you might not know him yet. And I'm Katy Reed Hodges, our minister of congregational life. And so together we make up part of the pastoral care team, but not all. So, okay, we're finishing Missions Month at First Baptist Arlington.
Amen.
We are 4 weeks in, and we're turning our face to Advent, but not yet.
That's right.
Not for this podcast.
Although some churches celebrate Advent yesterday.
Okay, I couldn't get over it.
They did?
I couldn't get over it because I grew up in a more liturgical tradition that wouldn't do something like that. But for some free church friends of ours, they said, you know what? Thanksgiving's over. Let's turn our face toward Christmas.
That's right.
Let's put an extra Sunday in Advent.
We'll clap for them.
Did they add an extra candle?
I'm a free church guy.
Did they claim another fruit of the Spirit in which to celebrate? I have no idea, but it is what it is. So
I think when Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, either one falls on a Sunday, sometimes it gets a little dicey.
Okay, that's fair.
They think, let's go ahead and start.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I don't actually mind. It's just, I did see it on my Facebook feed and I thought,
we're going to wait till next Sunday.
What is First Baptist fill in the blank doing? I won't call them out.
Some of them are your friends, so hey, don't worry about it.
They are, I know. And I did actually I rarely do this. I made a Facebook comment and then deleted it. And it wasn't that bad, but I thought this could sound, our friend Matt Homeyer, who I respect and love at Trinity San Antonio, they did it. And so anyway.
Way to go, Matt.
Way to go, Matt. Make it your own, but
Absolutely.
Just you do you.
You are the pastor.
He's new. He's relatively new there for those that don't know that. So, okay. But you have finished up Missions Month by finishing up John.
Correct.
So we spent the last 2 Sundays in the last chapter of John.
Right.
And what I gave you kind of the offer is last week we had Kurt Grice on because you were on, it was Thanksgiving week. We were all kind of scattered. You were on vacation with your family.
Our resident biblical theologian.
Well, that's the thing. And it's like, hey, do you want to come talk about Jesus and this wonderful scene of him restoring Peter?
Absolutely.
And Kurt loved it.
Yeah. If he was just more animated,
just so smooth.
More energetic,
it was just so good.
I think he would come across better in this medium.
Yeah. You know, we couldn't find anybody else. So we had to get Kurt.
Oh, me.
No, and I just, he shies away from us praising anything about him. Yeah. That's just Kurt's.
But he is awesome.
He's awesome, and he did a great job. But that means because Kurt was here and you didn't get a chance to talk about that scene.
Correct.
And before we move into this Sunday, is there anything from last Sunday?
But I did get to preach on it.
Yeah, but tell me more is about telling us more.
Well, I think I would just say in general, John 21, just in general.
I know.
When you read John 20,
Yeah, let's do
And
it.
you get to the end of John 20, and John says, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name.
Period.
And so...
And you kind of think, what a good ending to the book of John, right?
Sounds like we're done. Yeah. There's no cliffhanger there.
Right.
And unlike Mark's gospel, Mark's gospel ends with the word fear.
Yeah, Mark just ran out of ink. Needed to mail it. Needed to mail that letter today.
Deadline. And so, and what I love about that little text there is it actually tells us why this book was written. And so, which is awesome.
Which is about the exact opposite of the beginning of John.
Yeah.
I mean, he's very clear in the end, this is what I'm doing.
Right.
In the beginning of John,
you have this cosmic statement.
He's inviting you into a moment, right?
Yes, really.
And at the end, he's like, okay, this is what I'm doing.
This is what I did.
Changed voices.
And,
okay.
And then you have...
So then you turn the page, though.
Page 21.
Yeah, which you're like, I didn't even know there should be a page 21.
Exactly.
So you called it yesterday an epilogue? Can I word that right?
Yeah,
okay.
That's what I'd call it, yeah.
I mean, from a source criticism perspective,
right.
as in how the Bible got put together, what can you... Is there information out there? How do we know more?
It's a great question. Here's what... First of all, the criticism, the word criticism, for those of you that are watching
it can
or
sound
listening,
like critique.
It actually means to analyze. And so it's an actual field of study. It's a discipline.
Almost like a film critic.
Yeah, in the New Testament arena. And so you have New Testament critics. That doesn't mean that they are, when we think of being critical of the text, they are evaluating the text.
That's good.
How did we get it? All of that. So the core critic, if you will, the fundamental critic, they're referred to as textual critics. They're the ones who just look at the text. How many ancient texts do we have? How do they compare to each other? Because these are all originally hand transcribed. And the way it was done, particularly as you get into the early Middle Ages, you've got monks sitting in a room, and you have like a Monsignor, if you will, who's just reading the Greek text. And you've got like 10 or 12 monks just transcribing what they're hearing. Okay.
Well, that could have its own
create
difficulty,
some human error, obviously. And so what textual critics do is they take the text, they're dated archaeologically with carbon dating and all kind of other techniques. Plus also there's enough historical record on some of these texts to be able to date them accurate, if that makes sense. In other words, when you have people quoting from a text and referring to it at a certain period in time, well, obviously it was already in existence.
Yeah.
So we have about, 5,000 good, complete copies of the New Testament in Greek. Okay. So the textual critic, his or her job is just look at all those texts. How do they compare? What are the oldest ones?
And
what are the best ones?
The goal being, what's the purest form of this text we can find?
It's the Word of God. So
right.
you're trying to find the best reading of the text, which just from a scientific perspective, it is a science, and it's really good, and it's incredibly accurate. So we have no question about the text. Yeah. To be honest with you, we really don't. I mean, if you're an honest person, if you're the kind of person who doesn't believe, that Jesus ever lived and all that, well, then you might quibble some. But if you're an actual textual scholar in any arena, you would look at the New Testament and go, wow, this is a whole lot of evidence. You can be really confident.
Because we've talked about like other comparable writings.
Right. Yeah. Like Plato's Republic or those kinds of things. You only have 3 copies in there.
3 compared to
5,000 that date back to the early AD 100s.
And when you start comparing them all, they're quite similar, right? They're reliable and trustworthy. Reliable. Yeah.
So, but then you have other types of scholars who try to figure out other things. So you have the form critics. What they do is they look at the form, the morphe, the form of the material that's in the text, and try to decide, where did this come from? Was this a hymn? Was this a soliloquy? Was this a sermon? Did this ever exist in some other form? Right. That introduces the source critics. The source critics are the ones who try to figure out what's behind these texts. Yeah. So, for example,
when were they put together? That kind of thing.
You got Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Very similar. So they're called semi gospels, synoptics. It's the Greek word. Well, many scholars believe there was a common source. The word Kel in German starts with a Q. So some scholars say, well, man, you read Mark, you read Matthew, you read Luke, there's just so much that's just alike. I wonder if there might have been a common shared document underneath that they all three used.
That we might not have.
That we may not have, and we've never found, but it's an idea about a source.
Yeah.
And so, well, then that leads to the question, well, how did all these texts get put together? So John's gospel is one of those texts that the source critics study to try to decide, was there like a Johannine school of theologians who really helped bring this material together post John, in other words, after his death, which feels kind of likely that John wrote this material, but somebody had to actually gather it together.
Which would have been commonplace. I mean, that's not
that
obscure.
would have not been unusual
right.
at all.
Yeah.
And so some people say, well, okay, if that's what happened, then John 21 must have been added kind of right at the end, because
you have that ending.
You look like
right?
you got this ending.
Yeah. Okay.
The textual critic, though, here's the textual critic's argument.
Okay, hit me with it.
If that's true, then we ought to have some ancient copies of John that don't have John 21.
Absolutely.
And we don't. Every ancient copy of John has John 21.
Is it Mark, the Gospel of Mark, where there is some variance?
Right. We have an ending in Mark's gospel that appears to be an addendum, if you will, because we do have the oldest manuscripts of Mark don't have those last few verses. And so we're pretty confident that that was added by a group of folks who were affiliated with Mark. With John, and the other question is, okay, if it feels like this is kind of like an epilogue, the next thing you do is you study the vocabulary to decide, okay, does this seem to be consistent with the rest of John's gospel?
Same source,
and,
same language.
And so you've got you got some scholars who would tell you that it feels different in Greek, but you have others who say there's just so much
you read Greek?
in common. Yeah, I would.
What do you think?
I think it's
what do you
John.
Say?
I do. I think it was part of the original
similar enough
text.
voice, language, all that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I also think that John's theologian, and I think John is sharing both of these stories, first of all, because they happened, second of all, because they paint a portrait for the church to understand its role in society, and also it provides us with the closure we needed for Simon Peter, so that
his
he
story
could go on and be the leader that God called him to be. So I think there's three reasons why John includes it.
Okay.
So the restoration of Simon Peter, which I preached on Sunday a week ago, powerful text. It shows the shepherding skills of Jesus, and then he passes those skills on to Simon Peter. I can assure you, Simon Peter is a much better shepherd post-restoration than pre-restoration.
Why do you think that is?
Because I think that he experienced the personal shepherding touch of Jesus, and then he's called by Jesus to go and shepherd others in turn. Yes. So he understands brokenness, he understands failure, he understands regret, distancing, repentance, and a process of being placed back into an area of responsibility.
So, okay, can I take you somewhere you probably weren't going to go?
Sure.
Do you think that our own experiences, failures, restoration, make us better pastors?
Of course. Sure.
So these green youngins that are, straight out of seminary.
Right. Very knowledgeable.
But you've got 40 years on them now.
Yeah, very knowledgeable.
No offense.
And you want to learn, and you want to, for somebody in my position, I enjoy being around younger ministers because I love the energy. I love sometimes the innocence. I love the imagination. I love the desire. And also their knowledge, because they have been educated at a different time in the life of any seminary than me, so which means that there's a different pedagogy usually, or there's a different perspective by the professors who taught them. And so I'm always interested in that. And so
they bring a new perspective.
They do.
In many ways.
And so when I'm, the years that I spent at Baylor, on the Board of Regents at Baylor, prior to that, I spent 8 years teaching at Truett Seminary, teaching preaching.
We overlapped.
We did.
But I didn't
We somehow avoided each other.
Well, I had not yet taken preaching 1 when you were teaching preaching 2.
That's right, upper level class. So, but nevertheless, what I would typically do there, and what I still do whenever I'm at Baylor, I will go through the bookstore and I will look through the seminary bookshelves and just see what the professors are using now.
And I bet it looks a lot different.
Very different. And so sometimes I'll just pick up a couple of those volumes because I want to be reading and kind of just sensing what this era of seminary students is studying. However, what the young seminary student, graduate, young minister does not have.
There's something seminary can't teach.
Correct.
And
it's just the wisdom and the expertise of just years of being in the mix, being in the fray, if you will. Now, you can be in the fray and learn nothing. So it's not a guarantee.
You can be in the fray and be a terrible
That's
minister.
exactly right.
Yeah.
So no guarantee there.
Yeah. You can mess up a lot and not learn anything.
Right. Hopefully you've gained some wisdom. And so I've been doing this since 1983. So I've got about 40 years in. And so I've learned a thing or two. And there's no question my experiences have shaped me and have helped me to better understand, empathize with people. And also, I think too, help me to know when sometimes to act and when sometimes to let the Lord do what only He can do. Because in ministry, to me, there are two aspects of ministry. There's the spiritual component, and there's the tactical component, and they're related. They're connected. You can't separate them. And there's a ditch on both sides of the road. You can become so spiritual that you become paralyzed. You never really take action.
The rubber never hits the road.
Correct.
That kind of tactical.
But you can become incredibly tactical, and then you start relying on your own ability, your own ingenuity, and you rule out the spiritual side, which is just as dangerous.
It's like shoot, ready, aim.
That's
Is that
right.
how you say
Exactly.
it? Yeah, you just go and do.
For me, the spiritual always comes first. It always undergirds the tactical. It always contextualizes the tactical. The tactical, to me, kind of gives feet to the spiritual, if you will. So, and I just see that played out over and over and over.
And that balance you've developed over your ministry life.
Over a long time. And you see in John 21, Jesus tactically is a really good shepherd. But he's also a very spiritual person.
Yeah, it turns out he gets that balance right every time.
Every single time.
Jesus. And he's the only one that does.
He's the only one.
And we have to learn from him.
But he is our model. And so I think we learn. And so to me, Jesus is engaging in some very important actions in John 21. So our text, one is the shepherding side.
Right, and this restoration is
beautiful.
beautiful.
The two components of the church are in John 21.
Okay.
Shepherding the people of God.
Yep.
Jesus shows us how to do that.
Yeah.
Reaching people, though, with the gospel for the church, for the mission of God.
So good. And
that's the first one.
Yep. And that's what yesterday,
the miraculous catch.
That's what we talked about yesterday, right? Okay.
That's right. That's what I would say.
Then may we, 17 minutes in, tell me more about that text. I have some questions. First off,
it's a great story. It's a great story. It is so connected to everything.
Well, John is my favorite gospel.
Right. So, but it connects to everything.
And the stories are incredible.
Yeah. You've got Jesus giving them bread and fish. Well, okay, duh.
Yeah. We've seen that before.
Right. And you've got them catching a miraculous catch of fish. Yeah. Well, that's happened before as well. And so it's almost like and then of course when Jesus restores Peter, it's almost like you've got 3 years of
you've got that.
The fire and all of their experiences are all kind of compressed into this little experience here on the shore of the Sea of Galilee.
It's a great conclusion.
It really is.
Any good storyteller would appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Right? So.
And that's why I'm convinced it's John's.
Because it's so good. Yeah. Yeah, this wasn't just some. Yeah, right. That's good. Okay, so.
And he saves it for the end, but he had to because that's when it happened.
And it does weave some things together.
It does.
You leave with a sense of closure that others don't give you.
That's right.
So.
I love it.
Okay, well, can I ask some questions about it?
Absolutely.
Okay. Everybody still with us? Still with us? Okay. Let's make sure. I don't have headphones on, so I don't really know
Just pick
how
one.
this is
it's
going.
all good.
Okay.
That was perfect.
Yeah, that was ideal for the moment, I'd say. We don't really know. They're labeled. Kyle has labeled them for us, but it doesn't translate. So,
right.
Okay. So you preached on John. You started out with givens, not obvious. I don't want to say it's obvious, but givens, our context, just where we are. And a good reminder, Arlington has changed a ton.
Tremendously.
And I moved here 8.5 years ago. Downtown Arlington has changed a ton.
Completely different.
When I moved here, and we won't camp out on this, we're in the Wade building. I'm 5th floor office. You look out, and the George Hawks Library is getting torn down when I moved here.
Right.
So that they could make way for 101 Center and everything there, start rebuilding a new library across the way. Now that's like old downtown Arlington. I mean, I'm looking out the window here. We have a new apartment, Park Place, which is huge.
Yes.
And that used to be a little odd sandwich shop. I mean, there's just Arlington is changing around us,
Mhm.
but the demographics are changing a lot.
For
So I
sure.
guess the context is just the harvest is plentiful.
That's right.
Check it out. Let's
Mhm.
not miss it.
Mhm.
But then you talk about just the given of just the commitment that we
Mhm.
have, which for
Mhm.
you is the gospel's good news and the world needs it. Or
That's
I
right.
don't know how you worded
Mhm.
it, but it was
That's right.
something like
Mhm.
that. So those are givens, and I don't think we need to take a ton
Right.
of time on those
Correct.
unless there's anything you
I'd
want
go
to
with
give.
that.
But what I do want to talk about is this catch
Right.
scene and how that translates to us as fishers of men in this current context,
Mhm.
because it is very different.
Mhm.
But you hopped into numerology in your sermon.
Which is unusual for me.
Well, I've been here 8.5 years, and I'm not saying you haven't, but it's not.
Yeah.
So I don't know much about numerology.
Yeah.
Luke was sitting next to me while we were watching it in the Welcome Home Center while we were helping some guests, and he was like, oh man, what's he doing? And if he was here today, he was kind of like, people are going to come talk to me about this, and I'm not sure what I'm going to say, And so tell us a little bit about, for the listener and the watcher,
Right.
the viewer, we may not know much about numerology at
Right.
all. So what does that mean? Where'd it come from?
Right. Well, there is no question.
And how did you tie it back to
Yeah.
this obscure text? in the
There
Old
is
Testament?
no question that the biblical writers use numerology symbolically. There's just no question about it.
There's some more obvious examples of that,
course.
perhaps.
I mean, for example, John, and so for the fact that I'm reading John's gospel, and this is the same person who writes the book of Revelation, which has
Full
some of that in
of-
it. You don't have 5 churches in the book of Revelation. You have 7 churches in the book of Revelation. Well, the number 7 has this idea of completeness in Jewish theology. The Lord created the world or the universe in 7 days, that we live in a rhythm of 7 days every week. And for them, every 7th day is a special day. It belongs to the Lord. They call it the Sabbath. And so whenever you see the number 7 or any derivative of 7 in the scripture, you have to at least pause and go, that's interesting. And then for whatever reason, the number 12 is very important to Jewish theology and history. You have the 12 tribes of Israel under the old covenant. So when the new covenant is going to be established by Jesus, how many disciples does he choose? Well, interestingly enough,
Pretty random.
12.
Probably pretty random.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've got these 12 apostles. And so there's no doubt there's that connection. The number 6 also is an interesting number to them. That's the symbol of incompleteness, not quite, if you will. Well, the number 3 is a perfect number to to Christians because of the Trinity.
Right.
And so if you take the number 3 and combine it with anything, well, there's something there in Christian numerology. So, for example, you get to any kind of number that's affiliated with Satan. Well, it's not just 6; it's 6, 6, 6, 3 sixes. And so, you start seeing all this, and there's just no question it's there. So you've got the number 1,000, which also seems to have a certain feel of completeness to it. There's the 1,000-year reign of Christ. And then you've got the number in the book of Revelation of 12 times 1,000. So you get 144,000. So you got the old covenant, the new covenant times 1,000.
Yeah.
So there's no doubt that there's something there. Now you can go to seed on it.
And people do, right?
They do.
They get
you
a
can
little
go crazy
crazed.
with it, which I don't think I do. But
let's hope not.
So
I don't want to be part of that.
Yeah, when you're reading this gospel story, and for John could have told us this story and just said it was an incredible catch of fish, unbelievable, never seen anything like it. Thought I was going to sink the boat. And then he says, as a matter of fact, there were 153.
Yeah, which is a number that was like, okay.
Random number.
Right. I mean, compared to all the numbers you've just talked about that would pique my interest.
Absolutely.
None.
Yeah. So.
Yet you found, help me, let's connect the dots.
Somewhat, maybe obscure, some people think.
Yeah.
But I'm not on an island here.
Okay.
You start looking for imagery in the Old Testament because John, when you're reading John, one of my professors at seminary used to say what he loved about John is that children can swim freely in John's gospel and frolic and love it and enjoy it, and elephants can drown in John's gospel because on the one hand, it has this simple story.
It's accessible.
It is. For God so loved the world, he gave his one and only son.
Yeah.
I mean, I am the good shepherd,
Yeah,
I am
they caught a lot of
the
fish.
world. Yes, awesome.
Yeah.
But then you've got, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. So all of a sudden, you can go deep into John's gospel really quickly.
Mm-hmm. And never
And
hit the depth,
maybe,
right?
Correct.
Never plumb the depth of it.
You'll never find the bottom.
Yep.
So, which is a part of the beauty of the way John tells the story. And so John's language, his use of different verbs and the way he tells the story, it's fascinating. And, he talks about signs and he talks about glory and he connects glory to some interesting things in the life of Jesus. And so if John puts a number in the text, it has to give you pause. You just can't help yourself.
We're talking about verse 11, by the way, if y'all are,
John 21,
yeah.
153 fish.
Yeah.
So scholars, I'm talking
large fish. It was full of large fish, comma, 153, comma,
so
and then he keeps going.
Pick somebody, Tertullian, Augustine, these ancient church fathers, they all grappled with that number. It's not like it's a new phenomenon to where all of a sudden, in the 20th century, in the middle of the height of biblical criticism, somebody said, whoa, what's this 153?
Yeah, which would be easier to dismiss.
Yeah.
Right.
So this has been going on a long time.
Okay. Trying
to figure out, is it connected to the number 10? What's interesting is it's connected to the number 17. You just can't get away from that. That 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5, whatever takes you to 17. Yeah. That takes you to 153. That's what got scholars' attention, is that 17 being in the heart of 153. Yeah. So they begin scouring the scripture to try to figure that out. And so where a number of really competent New Testament scholars have landed is in this text from Ezekiel, where if you go back to Ezekiel 47, you have this story, this prophecy in Ezekiel about the people of God, the image of them being fishermen, and they're standing on the shore from En Gedi to En Galhim, I think it was. Well, as you know, Hebrew doesn't really have numbers, right? But they have numerical values. The letters do, and those two places, the first one in Hebrew adds up to 17. The second one adds up to 153. Well,
that caught their attention.
And it's fish. It's the imagery of fishing. Right. So that's one of the things that scholars have done is they've gone back to the Old Testament prophecy and said, well, why would this story be so connected? What's John trying to say? Yeah, what is the point? Yeah. And so I feel pretty confident that's on John's mind and heart, that he is going back to something that he saw prophetically in the Old Testament. Jesus, of course, is the one who's guiding it. And with this miraculous catch, there's the fulfillment of what seems to be prophesied in Ezekiel. And there's this idea of completeness, that all the fish that are supposed to be caught are going to be caught. They're all going to be gathered into one net, not two nets. So it's not going to be the Jews in this net, the Gentiles in that net. That's not how it's going to be. It's going to be one net.
They can hold it all.
All kinds of fish, just like the fish in the Mediterranean. It's what Ezekiel says. So in other words, all kinds of fish gathered in one place. And that number 153, for some reason, seems to communicate the fulfillment, I believe, of the full casting of the net of the mission and purpose of God. And then one day when all that's gathered and God says, we've done all that's going to be done in this part of the story, then the end comes.
Full fulfillment.
Correct. So that's really where that comes from. It's fascinating. I get it.
Deep.
And you again, I think you've got to be careful and thoughtful. But when you're reading competent New Testament theologians who are very careful in their interpretation of the text, and they are particularly in this era, are pointing you to Ezekiel 47, numerous ones of them over and over and over.
Yeah,
I feel like
attention.
I feel like I'm in good company.
Yeah,
and I'm not going to go crazy over it, but I think it's worth pointing out because I want our people, when they're reading the text, whenever something in the text gives you pause, there's probably a reason why it gives you a pause. And you need to take some time to explore. And you may come up with a real simple explanation. Yeah. You may not find anything quite that complex, which is okay.
Some answers are there.
Well, like, for example, Jesus will say the guy was on the road to Jericho and it was a 3-day journey. Okay, well, I don't have to stop and go, man, 3 days. I wonder what that's symbolizing. There's 3, man. 3 is a great number. Yeah. Well, you don't have to go crazy.
Took 3 days. Yeah.
But when you have something like this that's inserted in such a way that is just a little odd, that detail would be included. Right. I think it's there.
It's worth stopping to listen to. Well, I think that's
I won't hinge any fellowship on it. If you disagree with me, I'm good.
Good. So if anybody doesn't agree, if you disagree with Tertullian or Augustine, you just come tell us.
It's all good.
Fine.
I'm good with it.
Okay. Well, You got another round in you?
I do.
I've got a question for you. So we can talk about a lot of the fishing metaphor as well. One thing that I think is a helpful image, and Luke's talked about this with us before too, is in this scene, they're not fishing alone.
Correct.
Like I learned to fish at Camp Creek Lake with a rod and a reel and a bobber and a worm, just me. So if I caught a fish, I caught a fish, you know, and it was usually a little sun perch.
Right.
And I caught the same fish 18 times because I was a kid or whatever. But in this,
There's nothing wrong with that.
No, I mean,
nothing wrong with
this is Texas fishermen.
It's all good.
This is how we do it, right?
That's right.
And so I don't know how they do it in Alabama. More noodling.
No, we don't do that. That's an Oklahoma phenomenon.
We did some trot lines.
Yeah.
Which is still pretty individual.
Sure.
But anyway.
Yeah, we saw that.
Because there's catfish. But anyway, this imagery, though, I like, and it's compelling because you're saying they did it together.
That's right.
They're fishing. It's a team. And with one person couldn't go out and accomplish this.
Correct.
And so there's this corporate ownership of the mission of God, not a siloed,
individualistic.
Yeah. So tell us more about that.
Yeah.
Because that's really lovely.
I love that. In fact, I've had the, I guess, advantage of being in parts of Africa where I have seen fishermen at work, and this is how they still do it.
They do.
You know, these aren't large companies. These are just guys that they go out and fish every day, and they bring their fish into the market every single day. People go down there and buy it. I mean, in Sierra Leone, I've seen them do it. And this is what they do. You watch them. You see one guy, he kind of gets out of the boat, and he's the guy that casts the big net, whatever you call the big net. And so they've got kind of the fish encircled, if you will, this huge net. And he's in the water. You know, you think it'd be kind of weird because you think you shouldn't be scaring all the fish, but the fish have been trapped. They've spotted schools of fish, and they've dropped it down deep enough where those fish aren't deep diving kind of fish. And so, then you've got the casters, and you see those guys, and they're working together, and they're casting these nets. They're casting it inside the big net, and then they've got a way that they're holding on to these ropes, if you will, and they start drawing it in from the bottom side, and it just kind of closes on the fish, and then you can watch them. They'll just pull it up onto the deck of their boat. And actually, when they get to at least the ones I've seen, when they get to the little harbor, whatever you want to call it, they have these wooden platforms, and those guys come, and they're still in the net, and they'll just lay those nets out, and you see these women there who are coming in the evening. They don't have refrigerators, so they're coming in the late afternoon, you know, sometimes in the morning, and they're just grabbing live fish, and they're putting them in these buckets, and that's what they're doing. They're selling their catch. Wow. And so
very corporate,
but
corporate.
There's never one fisherman.
I mean, okay, in that endeavor, about how many people does it take to get that fish to market?
Yeah, you know, the last one I saw in Sierra Leone, there were about 10 guys in this little group, you know,
and then the women on the pier.
Yeah, and the women were everywhere on the pier, just waiting for them to come, you know. And so I thought it was a really cool thing, you know, because I couldn't help but think of these stories right here. And to be honest with you, I didn't really go far enough in my thinking. I was just thinking to myself, man, this has been going on a long time, and this is still how these guys are doing this. But the connection to me, which I think is a powerful one when it comes to being fishers of men, is that we need to do this together. You know, we don't have to evangelize individually. We come together as people, and that's why I tried to paint that picture Sunday morning for the church to encourage them, our people, to encourage you, any of us. Partner up with some people and figure out ways to reach people with the gospel. You don't have to do this all by yourself.
You don't. You
can have individual conversations, and you should.
Yeah.
But there's more to it than that.
And we actually have a whole ministerial staff that would love to help you.
Absolutely.
You know, Luke particularly is chomping at the bit to help groups figure out how to turn outwardly.
Yes. And that's what these table groups are about.
And still be you.
Yes,
I mean, that's the beauty of it. We're not asking you to change your DNA.
Yeah.
Whoever you are and whatever group you run in.
But Sunday school classes, the way we do church here, we have Sunday school classes, which I love.
We're rich with groups, and they are rich.
Those groups are great. They're great net casters.
Yeah.
You know, particularly if we do it together. You get together with a smaller group within your Sunday school class or your small group. Say, okay, who all do we know? Who are we encountering right now that we know needs the gospel? We know needs the church. Maybe it's somebody's connected to your grandchildren or to your children or to you, you know, or whoever. Well, there's nothing wrong. And in fact, I think it's the best way to do it, to come together and decide, how can we best do this? And who's good at what? And some people are good at hosting. What if we have a dinner at your house and invite 2 of these couples? Because you're really good at hosting things. And I'm pretty good at inviting. I'm just not good at hosting. I mean, table groups are really one of the experiments for us right now of net casting together, if you will, and fish together. I just think it's a great way to do it. And to me, you share in the joy of it because Jesus, I mean, the Bible says, I think it's Paul says that one day he uses a different image. He uses the sower and the harvester. It's the same principle.
Mm-hmm.
Paul says one day in glory, the sower and the harvester are going to walk together, because they work together, Some of us are really good at sowing. Some of us are good at harvesting.
Well, and that ties into, you've said it on your big whiteboard Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And then you quoted Ephesians at the benediction, but this idea of that God has gifted the church, apostles, prophets, evangelists, shepherds, and teachers, the sense that we all have different stations, different gifts that we bring. And those are, when you talk about, some people are gifted in just gathering people.
They are.
And my husband can do that. He's just good at bringing people around a table and making them feel very, even though they're from different areas of life together. And then you have that's an evangelical way. But then you have shepherds that are going to kind of keep them connected.
That's right.
And you have apostles that are going to go find new people groups. And there's a sense that, I'm left out teachers. There's teachers who are going to teach. But anyway, there's just this sense that we can do things together, and we actually are gifted and stationed within the church from different angles.
It's almost like God knew what he was doing when he put us together as a church. And then you think about all the spiritual gifts. People have the gift of hospitality, the gift of mercy, the gift of administration. Well,
just to hold it all together.
That's a composite, if you will. That's the corporate body of Christ. And so it just stands to reason that, to me, we're better together doing this than we are just individually. And it also, to me, it removes a couple of things. It removes the excuse, well, I'm just not an evangelist. Well, okay. But guess what? You're still called evangelism. It doesn't matter. Or it removes the kind of the sense of obligation. I've got to do this. Well, you do. But if you do it together in concert with other believers, you draw upon each other's gifts and skills, because some of us are better at some things than others, which is awesome. Cindy's really good hosting. She's a great hospitality person. She loves to do that when she has time. But she doesn't want to be the person in the mix that's drawing the people in and kind of keeping the party going, so to speak. That's my job.
Yeah.
So that's how we've done it through the years. We'll have groups at our house, and Cindy's going to make sure they have everything they need. She's really good at that. I'm not. I don't think of it sometimes. And I'm always like, they'll be fine. Don't worry. She's like, they're not going to be fine.
Yeah.
These round plates are all going to go right over here.
Yeah.
That's how it's going to go.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we need to put those round plates over there.
Yeah.
But
they're going to be fine. You know why they're going to be fine? Because she thought through everything.
Exactly right.
Brian and I have a little bit of that. Yeah, okay. It'll all work out.
But when they get there, I'm the one that's in the mix.
Keeping the party going.
And so we do that together. Yeah. And to me, what it does is it becomes a blessing because we build off each other's strengths. And it's a much better experience than if I were trying to do all of it or if she were trying to do all of it. Well, take that however far you want to take it. To me, the Lord has given us people in the church, all kind of people, gifted. Well, let's find our way to each other, and then let's go fishing. Let's go fishing, because there's a whole lot of people.
Because the first thing that you talked about in the sermon, the second thing, our commitment is that the gospel is good news.
That's right.
And everybody needs it.
Absolutely. And I think they're hungry for it, Katie. I do. I think they're hungry for people today. They want to believe in something. I think there's so much cynicism in my society today, and I get it, because everywhere you look, it's just hard to believe in it. You look at so many systems that are in place today, and you're like, it's corrupt, or
they're not worth trust.
Exactly.
Right?
I'm not going to give my life to it. People need to be a part of something that really matters, and we are in the thing that matters the most. And so,
yes, we're in a relatively hopeless and very cynical society.
Yes.
And we have good news.
Absolutely.
And it really is good news.
And people are drawn to it, and they're drawn to authentic people. When a few years ago, I was at LaGuardia Airport, and we were. LaGuardia
is a lot nicer than it used to be.
Yeah, it is.
Here's my.
Yeah, it is.
I don't know. Relatively recently, and
this story's back when it wasn't great.
Okay. Well, last time I went, I thought this isn't LaGuardia. Anyway,
it's much better.
That's a freebie.
I agree.
That's a freebie. Okay.
But we were supposed to catch some type of a shuttle, and we were having trouble finding it. And we were coming down the escalator, and Cindy and I, and we both had this look of, is this the right? Are we on the right? That we're looking for signs. Right as we get close to the bottom, there's a little desk there, and there's a guy standing there, and he was just kind of bobbing, and he looked when he said, "I can tell by that look, you have no idea where you're going, and that's why I'm here." And I went, awesome.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, I'm trying to do this. And he said, but you are in the right
I'm really glad
place. He
you're
said,
standing where
right
you are.
over here, bus B is coming. You sit right there, and I'm telling you, I'll let you know when
I
it
love
gets
that
here.
confidence.
And then
I
he
love
turns
it.
around, and I'm watching him do that just
All day long.
all day. So finally, I walked up to him, and I said, hey, dude, I want to ask you something. I said, you enjoy your job. He said, how can I not enjoy my job? He said, I am on mission from God. He said, you see, I'm a Christian. And so part of my responsibility is to make this right here shine. He said, I don't know how to fly an airplane. He said, I don't understand all the ticketing that everybody's doing here. He said, but you know what? I know this little area right here. And he said, as long as I'm here, the light is going to be on. And man, I just high-fived him, and I thought,
That's awesome.
I love that, So it wasn't that he was preaching. He wasn't teaching, but there was something about him that I was just watching people who were just drawn to him, going up to him and talking to him. And so when I went out that day, I told him, I said, I want to tell you something. I'm also a Christian. Good job. And he just high-fived me. And I thought, I just love it. People are drawn to people that believe in what they're doing, that they're authentic at what they're doing. To him, he recognized his role was to help all of us get to where he knew we all weren't trying to go
And
somewhere.
it seems like he found a really natural way to share that.
Absolutely.
Like, did you know this is connected to my life with God?
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't shy away from the fact that,
I love it. First thing he said, I'm on mission from God.
Yeah.
I thought, man, me and you,
And you
we're
thought,
going to be buddies.
like the Blues Brothers. Blues Brothers? Did I get that
Yeah,
right?
maybe.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just think people are drawn to authenticity, and you live it out in a way that's indigenous to you, and then do it together with a group, and people are going to be drawn
And you don't
to
have
it.
to be perfect. When you talk about authenticity,
That's right.
it's figuring out how to share the gospel and do it well. I'm not saying I have, but it can be embarrassing. It can be messy. You can feel like you failed. But the only failure really is if you stop trying.
That's right.
Because we're in it to learn and to follow, just to be faithful to God.
That's right.
And I think that's the thing. If we really want to follow Jesus in this world,
Just keep doing it.
we're going to figure out how to lift him up
That's right. Just keep
to
doing
a
it.
hopeless and hurting world.
That's right.
So,
Amen.
okay, boss. I say we end it there. Is that
I
okay
like
with
it.
you?
I love it.
Okay. Well, thank you all for listening and
watching.
viewing.
Wow.
Hi. I don't know where this is going, but say hi in the comments and we'll do it again.
That's right.
I think it's going on Facebook, right? I think so.
Wherever.
We're going to make it as accessible as possible. And I think our Facebook page is one of those. So we appreciate each of you, those listening and those viewing, and just our church. We just love being here. I know we've talked about that. We're grateful to be here to serve y'all
Amen.
and to follow Jesus together in this context that we're living in. So thank you. We'll be back next week with Luke.
Amen.
Bye.